Welcome to Japan Seikatsu. I'm Ian, and today I would like to speak to you about how I failed my way to passing JLPT Level 2. Let's get started. First, a very big thank you to the Japan Seikatsu community. This is a question from the community asking me to share my JLPT journey, so I'm very happy to do so, and I hope that there's some learnings in this story that benefit you on your Japanese language journey. To get started, I also want to set the scene, and that is that learning Japanese, just like any foreign language, is going to be a major commitment of your time and energy. That's going to take time. I think it's very similar to crossing the continental US. So from New York to sunny California is about 3,000 miles. If you walk it, it's going to take about 6 months. And if you are able to run, the fastest person to ever do it was 42 days. But either way, this is going to be a major endeavor that's going to forever change you in a positive way. But it's also going to be a major commitment. And I think we should think about learning Japanese in a similar fashion, that this isn't something like making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich that you can just do in a day or a month. It's going to be a journey, and that's okay. Well, I see any successful journey, there's 4 important things to keep in mind. Number 1 is maintaining motivation, and the reason you need motivation is to carry you through that journey. And it usually comes from having a strong reason, a dream, for why are you studying Japanese. And this dream, this reason should really excite you to keep pushing through. Number 2 is to burn your boats or burn your bridges. It's basically, once you commit to something, you burn the bridge behind you, and retreat is not an option. You have to succeed. And with learning Japanese, I think this is similar to putting yourself in an environment where you have to hear Japanese, use Japanese, write Japanese. So this could be done in many different ways. If you live in Japan, it's maybe befriending Japanese that don't speak English or your native language. Maybe it's working or living in a more rural part of Japan where Japanese is much more of a necessity than some of the larger cities like Tokyo. But you can also do this if you don't live in Japan, right? You can put yourself on a Japanese diet. So you make a commitment that for this month, I'm not listening to any English language TV, YouTube, music. It's going to be entirely Japanese. So number 2 is to burn the bridge, to burn the boats, and commit yourself to this journey where retreat is not an option. 3 is to not give up. So you will never get to sunny California if you give up. And it relates very much to number 1, which is you need to maintain motivation. And that's important, to not giving up. If at any point you give up, you may have made it halfway across the US, but if you give up, you didn't get to sunny California. You didn't make it to your destination. So perseverance is a key ingredient with the Japanese journey. 4 is you need a roadmap, and for this, I think the JLPT is excellent. It's a Northern Star, and the beauty of it is that it works for anybody. So you could have just learned your first Japanese word today, and the JLPT can put you on a track to get you to fluency. So if you've just started, maybe N5 is the first target that you start to work towards. If you study Japanese for a bit of time, then maybe it's JLPT 3 or 4 or 2 or 1. Whoever you are, the JLPT can provide you, though, with that roadmap. Back to the walking across the US analogy, it's easy to get demoralized if you've been walking for days and days and days. There's no ocean in sight. But if you have a roadmap, you can look and go, wow, okay, I'm now crossing the border into Colorado. I've made great progress, and I now have my bearings on where I am on this journey. And by looking at this map, I can see that eventually I must hit water. I just need to keep walking in this direction. And that's what the JLPT can do for you. It can take you from station N5 to station N4 to N3 to N2 to N1. So a roadmap is important. And all four of these kind of connect. I said earlier that the motivation is important to not giving up, which is another important ingredient. That the JLPT is like a nice roadmap, but the JLPT is also like burning your boats, right? Because you're committed. You have now a deadline. You have to take this test, and you've paid for this test. You're invested, so you have a deadline that also provides, at least for me, it provided motivation. This test is only once a year, I believe, outside of Japan. I believe it's twice a year in Japan, but that gives you that motivation. And so these all kind of work together to make for a successful journey. This is the kind of 4 key ingredients to successfully accomplishing your Japanese language journey. If you keep those in mind, I think anybody can become fluent in Japanese. But then the question is, do you want to walk across the US? Do you have 6 months? Is 6 months too long? Or would you like to run? Would you prefer to get this done sooner? So you can toggle the speed by increasing the amount of study time that you do. And it's almost like a principle. I mean, the more study time you put into this, the faster you'll get across your journey to getting to Japanese fluency. But there's a few things to think about with that, and that is that, at least for myself, if I start from New York and I start running, I'm gonna burn out. I'm not gonna make it to the end of my journey, which is, again, back to those 4 points, right? You need to not give up. You need to get to your destination. So you really need to find what works for you, what excites you, what's your pace, and to go at that pace. Now, one more thing about toggling your speed, increasing your speed, decreasing your speed, and it relates to that study time that you're investing. Please do not think of study time as, the candle, the textbook, studying in a dark room for hours on end. No, study time can and should be fun. So if you have a favorite Japanese YouTube artist that you like to follow and listen to them speaking in Japanese, perfect, that's study time. If you like to listen to Japanese music, perfect. If you have a favorite show on Netflix where they're speaking Japanese, perfect, that is study time. It's just touching the language, using the language, hearing the language, reading the language, writing the language. Any of that is quote unquote study time. So just increase your engagement with the language, and that'll increase the speed of your journey. So the magic kind of culmination is if you can rapidly increase your engagement with the language, your study time, and at the same time enjoy it, then you can kind of maintain that high speed to more quickly learn Japanese while maintaining motivation because you're enjoying the process. So that is what I would keep in mind. Now, for me, on my JLPT journey, I was much more like the walker than the runner. I was much more like the turtle. I moved to Japan in 2010. It was a JET program, so it was summertime. And now, years prior, I had studied 2 years of Japanese, so I had a base. I had forgotten a lot, but I had a base. And I did 1 year in the JET program. I took JLPT N4, so that's 2011, and I failed. And that was a disappointment to me. I felt that I had studied Japanese in university, and I'd been studying that 1 year on the JET program, that I really needed to, I felt I just needed to step it up, and that I was going to turn on the afterburners, and I was not going to attack N4 again, but I wanted to attack N3. And I did do that, and that next year I really worked. I studied a lot to try to improve my vocabulary, improve my reading ability, my listening ability, and I was then able to pass N3. Now for me, my goal was always N2. It's just the people that I looked up to, my language mentors that were non-native Japanese speakers had N2, and so for me that was almost a magical Japanese ability. That wow, you really could speak Japanese, and so that's what I was aspiring to. So after I passed N3, I decided that next year, 2013, now I was going to go for N2, and I failed in 2013. I then again took it a year later in 2014. I failed again, and then I took essentially 2.5 years off of studying for JLPT formally. And I finally, in 2017, January, I took it again and I finally passed the N2. And that's why I say, you know, I failed my way to success. 60% of the JLPT tests I took, I failed, but I still got to my end goal, which was to be conversant in Japanese, which is a wonderful thing. It's allowed me to have a career with a Japanese company. My in-laws are Japanese and many of them don't speak English, so I've been able to have a great connection with them. And all of that, I was using this very basic roadmap, which was JLPT. Finally, they say the 2 best times to plant a tree are 20 years ago and today. So we all wish we had access to a time machine where we could go back in time to lower school or middle school or upper school and start studying Japanese and have a huge head start. But for those of us without access to a time machine, now is the best time to get started or to get re-motivated on your Japanese journey. And I assure you, if I got to N2 with my turtle pace, you can definitely do it. So best of luck to everybody on their Japanese journey. Please do share in the comments section some of your learnings and how did you learn Japanese? Do you have tips? What are your current goals in terms of the language? And as always, also please be sure to like and share this content so that we can grow this community as widely as possible to help as many people that are passionate about Japan as possible. Well, thank you and have a good day.